Imagine working continuously for 5 months, showing dedication, meeting expectations, and doing everything your employer asks of you, only to suddenly lose your job just before you become eligible for benefits and job security. Then imagine being rehired again under a new short term contract, repeating the same cycle over and over again without ever gaining stability. This practice is known as end of contract or endo, and it remains one of the most controversial labor issues in the Philippines today.
We are the Group 3, and this is your Crash Course video and ethics. Today, we are not just asking what endo is, but whether it is morally justified, what different philosophers would say about it, and how the economic systems explain or critique such practices. Because endo is not just a legal or economic issue, in its most fundamental form, it is an ethical problem.
Endo refers to a labor practice where workers are intentionally hired under short-term contracts, which are usually less than 6 months, to prevent them from qualifying as a regular employee under the Philippine labor law. Because once workers reach regular status, they are entitled to benefits such as job security, healthcare, and paid leave, which are essential for a long-term stability. To avoid these obligations, some companies terminate their employees just before the 6 month threshold, effectively resetting the employment cycle.
From a business perspective, this strategy allows companies to reduce labor costs, maintain flexibility, and remain competitive in a demanding market environment. However, from the worker's perspective, this creates a condition of constant uncertainty, financial instability, and lack of protection. This tension between efficiency and fairness is where the ethical problem resides.
From the perspective of capitalism, particularly through the ideas of Adam Smith, Indo can be understood as a result of market-driven decision-making and the pursuit of self-interest. Smith argued that individuals and businesses act in their own interest, and through the invisible hand, these actions can contribute to the overall economic growth and efficiency. In this context, companies using Indo are attempting to minimize cost and remain competitive in the market.
However, Smith also emphasized the importance of moral sentiments, meaning that the economic action should still consider fairness and ethical responsibility. So while capitalism may explain why Indo exists, it does not necessarily justify it, especially when it leads to harm or injustice for workers.
In contrast, the socialist perspective, particularly through the ideas of Karl Marx, offers a strong critique of practices like endo. Marx argued that capitalist systems often result in the exploitation of labor, where workers are treated as tools for generating profit rather than as individuals with rights and dignity. Endo reflects this concern, as workers are repeatedly hired and dismissed in a cycle that benefits employers while denying workers long term security.
From that perspective, endo is not just a business strategy, but a form of systematic inequality and failure embedded within a capitalistic structure. Socialism, therefore, emphasizes the need for worker protection, fair distribution of resources, and economic system that prioritizes actual human welfare over profit.
In reality, most economies today, including the Philippines, operate under a mixed economic system that combines market mechanisms with government regulation. Economists like John Maynard Keynes argued that markets alone are not always capable of producing fair outcomes and that government intervention is necessary to correct imbalances and protect vulnerable groups.
The persistence of endo suggests not only the influence of capitalism, but also weakness in regulation and enforcement. A properly functioning mixed economy should be able to balance efficiency with fairness by ensuring that businesses remain productive while also protecting workers' rights and well being.
Now, turning to ethical theories, utilitarianism, developed by Jerry Bentham and refined by John Stuart Mill, evaluates its actions based on their consequences. Bentham might consider whether Indo increases economic productivity and job availability, potentially benefiting a larger of number of people. However, Mill would argue that true well-being includes stability, dignity, and security, not just economic output.
If endo results in widespread insecurity, stress, and inequality, then it reduces overall. happiness rather than maximizing it. From this perspective, Indo is ethically problematic because its negative consequence outweighs its potential benefits.
From the perspective of deontology, particularly the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, morality is based on duty and respect for persons rather than consequences. Kant argued that individuals must never be treated merely as a means to an end, but always as ends in themselves. In the case of Endo, workers are often treated as disposable labor, used for short term profit and then replaced.
Even if this practice improves efficiency, it violates the moral duty to respect human dignity, making it ethically unacceptable from a Kantian perspective. Similarly, Aristotle's virtue ethics ask what kind of character is reflected in such actions and whether they demonstrate fairness, compassion, and integrity.
Finally, John Rawls' theory of justice emphasizes fairness and the protection of the most vulnerable members of society. His difference principle states that inequalities are only justified if they benefit the least advantaged. Endo, however, places workers in a more vulnerable conditions, failing to meet his standard of justice.
Even from the perspective of divine command theory, where morality is based on the will of a higher authority, many religious teachings emphasize justice, compassion, and care for others. Practices that harm or exploit workers would likely to be seen as morally wrong under this principle.
So what can we conclude? And do exist at the intersection of economic efficiency and ethical responsibility. Capitalism explains its existence, socialism critiques its consequences, and mixed economics attempt to regulate it. Ethical theories, meanwhile, challenge us to consider its impact on human dignity, fairness, and well-being.
From all of this being said, I think we all know now. Endo forces us to confront a fundamental question. Should we prioritize profit and efficiency or dignity and justice? Because in the end, our economy is not solely defined by what it produces, but by how it treats us, the people within it.